Oh, I love streaming. My second thank you is to William Wong from Microsoft. William in the back there, thank you very much for hosting the pizza. Thank you, Microsoft. What else? Any other announcements? Anybody want to make an announcement? How many people are doing work in AI ML now? What? Only 2 people? Come on. Even after my talk back in March with the APIs to ChatGPT. So we're gonna update that in a few months with the new prompting techniques and fine tuning. So how to fine tune a model in Java. That'll be a cool talk. All right, so let me turn everything over to our lightning talk speaker, Rustam, coming all the way from Norway to talk about cloud native, right?
Yes. All right, let me share the screen. So it's going to be a very lightning talk, and the slides will be probably more look like a cartoon than actually slides, because I have way too many slides and way too few minutes. So that's going to be fun. All right, desktop. Are sharing? Come on. No. Share. Now we're going to see the infinity screen. All right. Very quick tips about creating a modern Java cloud native applications. So I'm trying to collect a few things, and I'm going to use as an example code from Java Jakarta EE, or Java EE as it used to be known. And I'm going to be also showing some examples from kind of thing that's built on top of Jakarta EE, especially Jakarta EE core profile called macro profile. So what makes the new applications different than what we used to do, creating monoliths and stuff like that? There are 5 things, and I removed everything with the introduction and everything. So there is a longer version of this talk, and there is also a link at the end of this presentation, which shows you some actual code you can play around with and see how it works. So first thing, fault tolerance. We need fault tolerance because things go bad and you're creating microservices and things are distributed, and some things will die, your network might die, and your applications need to react on something happening somewhere going badly. And well, short version, what happens to when something you rely on fails? What do? Your application crawls into the corner and dies, or it actually tries to do something useful. Why do you want to do that? Well, applications crash. You want to switch to a backup solution because the original one is not working, because you tried to fix it. Or worst case is that something stops working and you end up DDoSing your own application because all the other ones are trying to get hold of something that's not there, and they kind of saturate network and things go kind of nicely, badly, somewhere south. How do you do that? Well, this is an example, like I said, from microprofile spec. You see the spec link actually at the bottom, very easy to read and on purpose, but it's there, so you can actually see it or Google it. You can expect something similar in other frameworks as well, whatever that might be, Spring Boot, anything else. So annotations like timeout, retry, fallback, and circuit breakers, really nice things to do. You can see use of those, some of those in the code that I'll be linking at the end. Another thing, health. So you want to see how your application is doing, and you want to look inside your application and see what's up. I have a really bad pun there, so I'm kind of not really sorry about this, but well, kind of. So you want to see how your application is doing, and you need to know if container is up and running. You need to know if the application is up inside that container, because there's a lot of things that has to happen, right? Your application, your container has to be pulled down, then it has to start, then application inside of it has to start, and then it has to start receiving requests. And you need to know that for scaling things down, scaling things up, and so on, so on, so on. What you can expect to see out of the annotations, there you have readiness, liveness, and startup annotations. Third thing, metrics. So now you want to create custom stuff. You want to actually create a custom application metrics and expose them to platforms, to things like, I don't know, Kubernetes or whatever you're running your containers on. You want to measure custom parameters that are not measurable otherwise out of the box, and you want to make them specific to your application. So what you can do, example of this, again, the spec is down there in the corner. What you can do, for example, you can count things, and you just count, you just add content, and then you create some tags and information about it. Everything will get out of the box available at /metrics, which is really, really nice. It's not very human readable format. I mean, it's just wall of text. It's quite readable if you want to, but it's not made for you to read. It's actually made for some kind of other systems to know that they're at /metrics and just consume that and put them in the right places. Thing that is not microprofile is something called feature toggling. So the way you can actually turn on and off features remotely, that's also something we did not have very often before. Before we would just hide things in config files and stuff like that. What do you have to do to make features available, and why do you want to do that? Well, obviously you want to sometimes turn off and on features based on geographical location, type of users, your mood, weather, direction of the wind, I don't know. But then you have also things like gradual releases, creating focus groups, and other things that let you, feature toggling lets you control. Partially implemented features, some things in the back end are not ready, front end is ready. What do? You revert all the commits, or you just create a feature toggle and just wait for things to be finished. That's another way of doing that. How do you do that? Well, obviously you can do it created by hand. You can just create if and else's everywhere, and that's going to be a pain to remove. Put it in config file. Well, that kind of sucks because you might need to refresh and restart things quite often, but you can also use a tool. So an example of a tool that I'm mentioning here, that's in the corner, again, very readable. It's called Unleash. The reason I'm mentioning it because it's free. You can just pull it down and use. And the other reason is that it was made in Norway. So, you know, we've made a few things. One of them is a cheese cutter. The other one is feature toggling thing. Environments, configuration, infrastructure. So the last bucket is like everything else. First things first, it's a very important thing, and we have to print it out, put it on a mirror in the bathroom, and like look and read it every time you go, like wake up in the morning and brush your teeth. Do not do ClickUps. First of all, when you create your applications, do not just go and click and stuff. Write it into code, write it in something that is traceable, versionable, readable, basically creating actually documentation in itself. That's really nice. Why do you want to do that? Well, the good thing is that it's reproducible, so you can actually recreate your environments in a click of a button or a run of a script. Well, obviously it's kind of a documentation as well. And it's, well, obviously it's automated, so you can actually rerun things over and over again. A bad thing, it needs to be maintained. It's not write once, forget forever. It's actually write once and maintain forever. You know, bad things, a little bit, tiny little bit. Lots of good things, a little bit of bad. Delta good, I think somebody called it before. And other things, creating infrastructure as code, whatever you want. I'm not going to sell you any kind of solutions. Want to go Terraform, want to go Pulumi, want to go Open Tofu, fine. You can do configurations. If you want to do config, there is also a spec called microprofile config for Java. There are a bunch of other ways of creating configs. And if you're going to go, if you want to think about infrastructure, think which level you want to land on. When you want to go infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, serverless, you want to go old school and just create VMs and put stuff on it. I would not advise it, but you know, sometimes you might need to do that as well. So a few links at the bottom there as well for things like that. And that would be pretty much it. So if you haven't taken any pictures of the slides and you want to do that, this is probably the slide you want, because at the bottom you have a source code where you actually can go and play with all those features and things. And if you want to find me on social media, there is a link, the link on the bottom there, rustam.nl. That's where you'll find all my social media, because they're getting so many of them. Everything is trying to kill Twitter. Twitter is refusing to die. Well, you know. Right. That would be it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rustam. Perfect timing. Perfect timing.
I don't hear that very often. Thank you very much.
So I'm from Rustin from Norway to Steve from the UK. I feel like I'm at Devox in Antwerp.
What?
Okay.
No, I'm okay. So now I'm going to DevOps because I'm having my eyes taken out. I'm having the cataracts done. So that journey starts next week. So
Okay.
yeah, no, it's difficult.
It's great.
Yeah, well, I'm all up for it, but it's the fact that I have to weave it into travel.
If we live long enough, we're all going to get it done.
Yeah, that's what my
Well, with that
office is-
introduction,
Yeah.
here's Steve Poole.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's share. Which one comes up there? And I don't want to see that one. I want to see the other one. Please. Okay, bear with me because if I can't see the speaker notes, then it doesn't work for me. All right, I can't see the speaker notes. Okay, we'll just wing it. So thank you, Rustrum, for warming them up, getting rid of all those bits of water that we experience getting here. As it says, Java Zone 2022. It's not a mistake. I have brought a deck that I used there, and I changed one slide because I wanted to show you what we were saying, how things have changed, right? Because I could have gone through and changed things, and then it wouldn't have been so much of a wow. But going, hey, look, this is what I talked about last year, right? So we're going to talk about Maven. What comes next? Oh yeah, we'll talk about me. So I am the developer. I am the director of developer relations at Sonotype. Who's heard of Sonotype? Yeah, probably because you go, oh yeah, because Steve works there. It is not Sonosource or any of those things. We do a bunch of stuff, and we run Maven Central. Who's heard of Maven Central? Yes. Okay. Who's heard of Nexus? Yeah, about the same thing. Cool. We're going to talk about this stuff together. Right, what comes next? Okay, so let's take you on a journey. And near the end of the journey, I want to talk to you about some things I would like you to do, some of your homework. Okay, so how do we get started with this? Where does Maven Central come in our lives? Well, we all do this, don't we? We all go blah, 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 something. And wherever you go for it, you do Google for it. You're looking for a new component. You Google for it, you might hit Maven repository, you might end up somewhere else. And at the end of the day, all you're doing is looking for a bunch of coordinates that you can take and put into your POM or whatever else it is that you use, because there's a load of them. But it's the same, isn't it? It's a set of coordinates to a particular artifact in Maven Central, and that's what you do, right? And what I will talk to you about later on is why that's fine, but I would like to talk to you about your choices. Okay? Now, when you do this, you probably aren't thinking about this number. 90% of modern applications are open source, are made up of open source dependencies. If you think about the code that you write and the code that you depend on, it's an enormous number. So 90%, we reckon that 90% of a modern Java application is made up of somebody else's code, right? That's just dependencies. And of course, if you go bigger than that, you can talk about the open source for the Linux you're running, or I don't know, open source is everywhere. 90% of it that you use is written by somebody else. And where do you get it from? Where does the other 90% come from? It comes with repositories, dependency management, whether it's JavaScript or Java or whatever, right? And you can see, 8 million POMs, right? That's if you go to Google and just go, how many of these we got, right? It's an enormous amount of code that we rely on, and we access it via those coordinates, and it comes from Maven Central. Right? And you don't think about it, because this is what you do. You put those things in, you do Maven install or compile or whatever, and more stuff goes past you, and you don't think about what it is and where it comes from, because it's just there, right? So part of this talk is going to be about what's underneath the covers. And then I'm going to talk a bit about where we're going with Maven Central. And we're just going to explore the space. Okay. Oh, look, I think I said this. Yeah. Maven Central is changing. Some of it you will see, also you won't, right? But as I said, when you realize why we're doing it, and I'm going to talk that through, it'll also explain to you hopefully why some of the things I'm going to ask of you to do will become more relevant. Right, okay. So Maven Central, I say it's been there forever, right? It's not quite been there. It's not quite as old as Java. Here's the very first one, right? So that wasn't quite Maven Central, but luckily somebody managed to get hold of the domain. So, that was a bit far ago. But actually it was started by these two people, Brian Fox, who's the CTO of Sonotype, and also with Jason Van Zyl, the creators of Maven, the tool. They were the instigators of all this. And when they're creating a tool that manages repositories and does build systems, manages dependencies and does build systems, they went, hey, actually, where are we going to put this stuff? Maybe we should run something. And in the spirit of open source, they started at Apache, Maven Central, right? Right? And it ran 2003, set it up. You could go to Maven at Apache, and it was funded by public donations, right? It started off under Brian's desk, a little server, as all big internet companies start. And got there, got 2005, and they decided it was getting a bit too big, and so they wanted to separate it out, and as part of that was to move it to its own domain and all that sort of stuff. Still funded by public subscription. People were paying for it, which is cool. 2022, so remember this talk is from then, it's completely funded by Sonotype, right? So why do we do it? Why are we picking up the bill? And you'll see in a minute that it's quite a big bill. Why are we doing that? Sorry? Oh, that sounds like the fire alarm in the hotel this morning. Yeah, okay. So partly, Maven has just got too big, and we couldn't rely on public subscriptions. Right, now remember, this is being started by two people, Brian and Jason, like open source through and through. That was their heart, and they still is. And so it was created with that intent. And it's not like we're going to walk away from it. This isn't me turning up and saying, can you give us some money, right? Because we get some commercial value out of it, as you can imagine. But it's an essential thing for us as the Java community. And so we want to make sure it stays and it works and evolves, right? It isn't enormously complicated. There's sort of three ways in. You can be a publisher. Actually, good. Anybody here publishing to Maven Central? Of course. Two. Oh, excellent. So yes, I know it's a bit arcane, but if you don't like it, then shout, because they're always looking for input to the process. But so you can publish, and what happens then is it goes into, we have behind the scenes big fat Nexus repository, or multiple repositories, servers, and literally all the tech that we sell is at the back there doing the things it's supposed to do. So it's great in terms of being able to prove to ourselves and to our customers it scales and it works. So we have that route in. There's a search route. And then there's a bit in the middle, because there's a big bucket in Amazon, as you can imagine, with all the stuff. And you come in probably for the repo user and you just suck stuff down. So it's not particularly complicated. And there's some Jenkins jobs to move stuff around, because why not, right? Oh yeah, and there's an API, because it's a web service. So there's nothing rocket science there, right? But it's big, right? 8.8 million component versions, 27 terabytes. What's the other one? I can't remember. Namespaces, yes. 79,000 publishers. You can't publish to Maven Central unless you can prove you own the domain that matches the package name structure. Right? They are not the biggest numbers you've ever seen in the world for servers, but this is just the Java repo, right? And Java is not the biggest repo in the world, right? That's Node gets that honor. right? But you can see there's a lot of stuff going on there. And everything you depend on is sitting there. Yeah, 496 billion requests. That's how many we're serving, right, on a yearly basis. Ken, it's a big number. You can imagine we didn't want, this is where it's grown to. So the point was we didn't want to get to this point on public subscription because we needed something stronger. And so the decision was taken a few years ago that they were going to it's just going to run. So it's a public service that we run for everybody else. And they never said anything. I mean, I've been at Sonotype 2 years, and I vaguely knew that Sonotype ran Maven Central. And then I turn up and I go, what have you got to talk about? Do you want me to talk about? And they're like, oh, Nexus? And I'm going, oh, no, Maven Central. Why would anybody care? All right, well, I think people would be interested to see what's going on. So here we are. Right, where have we got next? Yes, demand has increased, right? It doesn't go up very much, but it is growing, and it continues to grow. And I've got some more numbers in a minute. What we have seen is that for some reason, people like creating code. And the rate at which we create code is growing and growing and growing, right? And whatever language it is, the number of versions that are turning up, the number keeps growing. So it's scaling out. So another good reason to have this all sort of kept in a good place. Right. What was I doing? Yeah, so let's move on from that one. Yeah. As I said, it's what we do, right? It does cost a load of money. I'm sure you could figure out from some of the numbers how much it costs us, but it's a commercial thing in the end because we can demonstrate, you can point to people and say, hey, we run Maven Central, which is a great thing. And we use all these tools in it, which are the things that you can buy, right? So that's cool. So it's, it's not like we're doing it completely altruistically, but there is a lot of that there because Brian and others have always been going, this is so important to everybody, right? Yes, there's one more thing that costs. It's very good to have a repo, but you would like to feel that the stuff that's in that repo is safe, wouldn't you? Yeah? How much about going to a supermarket and having no idea of the provenance of the stuff that's in the supermarket or whether it's past its sell-by date or anything like that, okay? That would not be good, would it? How many people here download stuff from Node and Python? Okay, guess what? You can't tell, right? So Java keeps you safe. And we've got multiple layers, and I'm going to talk through them. So the first thing is, to keep you safe, is that you have to own the domain. So if it's com.foo.blah package, then you have to own com.foo. And we have a little arcane thing, as you imagine, with text records and DNSs, which is really weird, but it works. And that proves that you own the domain, and then you can publish it. That little thing, it only is available, it's only available in Java. Every other packaging system, repository system, does not have that protection. So this way, version 1 of com.foo and version 2 of com.foo and version 3 will all have come from the people who own the domain. I go to the other programming languages, and version 1 and version 2 can come from different providers. And sometimes quite often, version 2 is published by somebody who doesn't have your best interests at heart. Right? So there's the first level of protection, domain ownership, right? And it helps us deal with malware getting in the thing. There's some, let me just do the next one because it's a bit easier to understand. There are different types of way that people try and break into systems in terms of repos. So typo squatting, which is where you spell it slightly wrong. So you go to Google and you want something and you get some dependency, somebody says something, and you type it in wrong, you just spell, misspell it, that's typo squatting. Because rather than the Maven going, don't know what you're talking about, can't find it, actually it does. At which point you're now connected to malware or at their very least some dubious code, right? And that's called typo squatting. That's where the names are wrong, okay? Dependency confusion is one where somebody publishes a higher version. or it could be a very high version. So if you're doing like get me the latest version, you don't get the proper one, you could get this other one. That's okay, we don't have that problem, right? Typo squatting, with sort of far enough down the domain in the package name, you're protected against. But if somebody typo squats on your domain, that's your problem. We can't do much about that, right? So there we go. Good one. Yeah, it is really, really important security system for you. Just that little tiny thing, right? Because in other places we're taking down. Sonotype looks at all the other repo systems as well, and we are literally issuing takedown orders in the Python and Node space in the tens of thousands over the years. We find and take down more than everybody else put together, right? We're now at the point where these things are being uploaded to these repositories by bots, right? It's automatic. And with this new thing called, what's it called, ChatGPT? Yeah, we're expecting and are seeing more sophisticated ways of doing that, trying to get to us, okay? So just thank yourself that you're using Maven and Java because of that protection, right? Okay. So everything else that we can do to help you is hard, right? You start thinking about how you could be compromised. Does it contain vulnerabilities? That's the first thing. And amazingly, most Java developers, when you download something, don't even think about that. You just go download, unless you happen to have some IDE plugin or something that will tell you, but mostly you just download it, right? It's not even part of the equation. It's like, you might go to Maven Central, you might go straight to repo, and you might go, what's the latest version? I'll have that one, thank you. But you don't go and check and see if it's got vulnerabilities in it. Because just because it's the latest version doesn't mean it's the best one, right? But we give you all that information. Because associated with Maven Central are things like OSS index, where all the vulnerability data that you need to make good choices is published. It's available to you. You can go to Maven Central, find the thing you want, click a link, and you'll get all the things we know in terms of vulnerabilities about those packages, right? It's all there. You just got to go use it, right? So you can see there's all stuff that we have to think about, and we are doing our best in both these spaces to try and give you a secure system, because that's the business that we're in. So everything that gets published on Maven Central goes through all the tools that we sell, and I'm going to say this because I know it's true. The sheer sophistication of these scanning tools and the big security research team we have means I would say it is the best. I mean, other people will say, hey, we're better than Sonotype. It's like, fine. You say it, we have proof because we know how to do this. And we know whether we can find things that the competition can't, right? But sales pitch over. I think it's a good tool. It's up to you to prove it, but it's up to you to understand the problems that you're trying to fix, right? So everything goes through that. The only thing we chuck away, the only thing we'll prevent happening is malware, right? We're not going to turn down vulnerabilities. If somebody publishes something and we prove there's a vulnerability in it, right? Or somebody else proves there's vulnerability in it, it stays in Maven Central, right? So people, when Log4j happened, people said, why aren't you preventing it being downloaded? And the simple answer is, why would we do that? Because there are people who are going to need Log4j and can constrain it so that they don't have the problem, right? Or they might be writing scanning tools. So if we stop it unilaterally, we break people, right? So the only time we'll do it is if we actually find malware, and luckily in the Java space, there's very few. We've taken a couple down in all the years this has been running, right? But we take malware down in a bunch of other places much more frequently. So yeah, so you can go to Maven Central, and then you can, and there's information on there, and then there are links off, and you can go find all the information you need, right? It's there. You have access to all the quality commercial stuff that we sell, and we have this big security team that's always to keep it up to date, right? So I just go, please use it, right? Oh, yes, but developers are slow to change because you don't use it. You don't have this in your head, right? Log4j downloads. Who was here? Was it 9th of December, thinking I'm going to have a great holiday? And then what happened? 10th of December? Anybody? Can everybody remember? Have you watched it for your minds? Log4j? Yes. Log4shell? Yes. It's my fault, by the way, because literally on that day, I'm talking to a security researcher who was always giving me stuff, and he was always giving us great Node things and Python stuff. And I go, give us a juicy Java problem. And he went, and we went, this is really bad. And then so we started taking it apart. So it just, I mean, I wasn't having to do what Gola or you lot doing about patching it, but I was taking it apart and we were going through and trying, and it's actually a very complicated configuration problem, because depending on which JVM you have and which version of Log4j you've got and a whole bunch of other stuff, you may or may not be vulnerable, which is why I had all that confusion. But the thing was, it didn't take long for most people to patch. I know we all struggled, for most people to patch. So this number, I think I have a bigger number, yeah, don't we? Yeah. So a year later, 51 million downloads of Log4j, the vulnerable type, was still happening. 33% of the downloads of Log4j a year later were still the vulnerable versions. Think about that. 33%. So basically, a third of the people in this room haven't got their act together as far as dependency management goes. Right? So I said that charts, this was from Java Zone, because now look, this is where I'm going to update it. This is the scary bit. So now this is live, as in, right? September 23, 250 million downloads of vulnerable versions of Log4j, 23% of all downloads. So it's gone down slightly. And the thing is, if you look at the data, you can see people have moved up to next versions, but there's still a bunch of you out there that are using the old one, right? And there's a whole bunch of excuses. Many of them are like, I didn't know, because they didn't have the right tools to figure this out. And there's a bunch of people, I was speaking to somebody actually at Java Zone this year, who said, it's okay, we don't have, the server's not internet facing. And then I had to explain how Log4shell worked and why that was a problem. And he left quickly because he just didn't realize, and once the penny dropped, it was like, oh, got a problem. So look, this is happening now, and this is just Log4shell, right? Good. And you may go, so what? I've downloaded a bad one. What does it really matter? You know, nobody's asking you to fix it. Well, this is where it all gets scary, right? So I started working at Sonotype because I was spending a lot of time talking about security, because I'd spent a couple of years running IBM's European DevOps team, right? Big team, servicing tens of thousands of developers. I went in there as a developer going, I don't care about security. It's all about process and, you know, and checklists, and I really hate it. And I came out going, oh my God, we have a problem. And so, which is why it got me here. So going back to 2016, cybercrime surpassed the drug trade for the first time, right? How much money do the bad guys make if they sell drugs versus breaking into your systems? First time, 450 billion or 50 aircraft carriers, okay? And apparently there's only about 52 aircraft carriers in the world, so you could buy all of them. But $450 billion, do you think that's a big amount of money? Who'd like $450 billion? Yes, okay.
We'll raffle it off at the end of it.
If you can, yeah, but buy collects, all right? Buy collects, right? Okay, so now, 2023, 6 trillion. Yeah, just can't get my head around 6 trillion. So 620 carriers. Each carrier apparently comes with free fighter jets. Right? And if you buy 620 carriers, you get 85,000 free fighter jets. Right? What are you going to do with this? Right? But let me give it to you a different way, because this is too scary. If cybercrime by GDP was a country, it would be the third largest country in the world. Do you think that's a problem? Right? It's been growing, cybercrime is 56, pretty much consistently, 56% per year. Right? Drug trade, because it's physical, it's a lot easier to manage because drugs have to move. Cybercrime, you guys don't pay attention. Your security guys, your DevOps guys are probably trying to get you to pay attention, but they have big problems of their own. We have a massive problem, and it just isn't going to stop. Right? Let's do the next one because I think, yeah. So the reckoning is that by end of next year or the year after that, it will be theoretically the biggest country. And these numbers are possibly underestimated. Some people are saying that right now it's not 6 or 7, it could be 30. Right? Obviously, this isn't money that really ends up in a space. It's just the cost. Because your insurance company gets packed, and so they have to fix it, and that costs money, and so your premiums go up. So this is always a mix of how much money they steal and how much does it cost us. So it's complicated. And of course, the bad guys aren't going to, report in and say to the Inland Revenue, yeah, we made $1 trillion. That's not how it works, but it's good enough to get the scary things going, which is why we're pretty certain that we wouldn't have a drug trade if Escobar had started now, because you see your laptop. Who wants to make 450 million when you can make 6 trillion without ever being caught? Without having to ship drugs around, which you can do on your own. It is a bad, bad problem. And if you think the money is bad, that's just a tiny problem, right? The money isn't what's kicked us off. What's kicked us off into the next phase is we're now into a cyber warfare stage. You probably didn't notice that this is what's happening, but all the technologies and techniques that have been used by the bad guys to make money, well, nation states have always tried to use those, but the penny has dropped that actually you can use all these techniques to get into power systems, to get into pharmaceutical systems, to get in delivery systems, right? And whereas we thought, perhaps naively, that the idea of cyber warfare would be a precursor to a physical war, that people would try and crash your systems as part of that. What we realize now is that actually it's here now and it's happening now, right? Because these bad guys, they want to get in to your systems very quietly, and they want to manipulate them. And manipulate them now. We have loads of examples of small scale problems, right? It could be, I don't know, it could be they hack Amazon and get delivery labels switched, right? It just needs small things that make, hit your economy, just make things worse. Lots of examples of traffic light systems or train systems breaking, right? Not necessarily for all the time, but just consistent, just it fell over. And it just impacts us. And what we're realizing is going on is that all of these bad stuff that's in the software that we're not paying attention to because we're worrying about productivity, it's being used against us in these ways. And it's never going to stop. Because A, it's so easy, right? B, it makes loads of money. And C, we're not paying attention. Right. Which is why, so I should say context, Sanotype does a yearly state of the supply chain thing, because obviously we are in the supply chain business. Software supply chain is dependencies through the CI/CD system, and shipping it on. So it's that piece. And so we measure it. We talk to customers and we go, what's going on? And we've noticed the number of attacks in the supply chain. That's your build processes. That's your dependencies. The attacks are just growing. The rate is ridiculous. There'll be a new copy out of this soon later on this year, and I'm pretty certain that number will be even more amazing. Right? So we know this is happening. We can see all the signs for it. And of course, like all security companies, we have access to the bad guys in a way, and it's quite clear where this is going. Right. So it's, all this sort of stuff. Now, I think I have a slide for it. Can't remember what comes next, but just to make this even worse, or make it more fun, depending which side you're on, Log4j, that thing we had, became the final straw. And a whole bunch of things happened, including the US government, i.e. your president going, let's fix this. And Log4j, the fact that we as the community, those numbers we were showing were quoted as being, look, this is the state we're in. The governments of the world would like you to fix this problem, but by things like Log4j and our inability to deal with it, has demonstrated to them that we don't know how to manage our software. And there are a whole bunch of laws turning up, and I've got a couple of examples, that are there to make us do this. Right? So good times are coming, yeah. So I've talked about typo squatting, dependency confusion, vulnerability exploitation. Everybody's trying to figure out how to find vulnerabilities open source code, because it's all about open source, because that's the 90% of stuff you download. It's like they're all trying to do it. You get paid if you're a bad guy, if you're a security researcher, you have no ethics. You can get paid multi-million dollars for finding a good vulnerability. You don't tell anybody. You report it to Russia or China, or whatever. Get a big fat check, and they now have a hole into somebody's system. Right? You can see the list. Right. Yeah. So because this is our business, and also because we're running Maven Central for you guys, it's like, well, we have to do something. So we are working to fix these problems, and it's going into Maven Central as much as we can. We've updated the front page. It needed a sort of a clean up anyway, but we need to update it, right? And we're adding in as much information as we can that's going to help you. Who's heard of SBOMs? Okay, the rest of you will soon hear about SBOMs. Software bill of materials. It's like a dependency chain. It's like the thing on the side of a can that tells you what's in it, what's your ingredients. SBOMs are a big thing about proving audit chains and making sure that you can prove where you got stuff and what's in it and what it depended on. They're coming. So they're now automatically generated from Maven Central. SIG store, which is putting signatures of these things. That's happening as well, right? We're working with a whole bunch of other open source projects, foundations, whatever, to work out what else we can assess that we can put into these systems to give you that data, right? Right? Enhanced developer intelligence, right? We want to give you the data that you need to make the right choices. Right? And it's more than just, does a dependency have a particular vulnerability? It's like, what mix of dependencies gives you the best protection? Because it's not always about the latest. Right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff up there. I encourage you, just go have a look and see what's coming. We're working with a bunch of others. So like this CLO monitor is one dashboard from CNCF. We're doing our own ones. We're working with them. The idea is that we're going to work out the behavior of the open source projects themselves to see if we can spot which ones have better or worse security tendencies. So that when you pick something, not only do you pick it out whether the dependency has vulnerabilities now, you want to know whether you're investing in something that A, will fix things when they're needed, and generally cares. So we're trying to figure that out with other people in the industry. What else we got? Yeah, and we're trying to figure out. We're trying to present it to you, but these are all the versions and upgrade possibilities of Spring. So don't worry about it. But basically, we went, where do people go from one version to another? And then we're trying to figure out what's the most optimal. What do people do? Wisdom of the crowd type thing. Because if we can see that 5% downloaded the next version, and then the day after they went to the next version after that, they might indicate that probably you shouldn't use that one, right? So if I download version 5, and then I go to version 6 the day after, then we'll say to you, probably don't use version 5. Right? It might be the right choice for other reasons. So we're trying to figure all that stuff out, right? And coming up with some heuristics. Some of this is a supply chains report. I mean, this is all like what we figured out so far just by seeing what people believe. We're going to try and quantify it and put it into Maven Central and OS's index so that you've got that data, so you can make better choices. Because if you guys made better choices the first time you selected something, so many of these problems of trying to patch emergencies later would not happen because you chose poorly. And I don't say it's your fault particularly because you needed the data. The data's coming. What you need to do is start thinking about those choices anyway. What else should I care about other than I'm downloading this thing from Maven Central at this version because that's what I want to do for the next project. Yes. Comes next, yeah. That's a list of a bunch of people involved in it, and I've had the fun of going to a few of these. It is a big problem. The thing you have to get out is that the industry, us as a software industry, our biggest challenge is that these people, the governments particularly, do not understand software. They're very frightened of software. So they look at it like commodities. Right? Whereas obviously OpenSSF and others understand software. We are trying to get it to work so that we don't destroy the open source communities, because that would not be good, but also get to the point where we're effectively have a model for us all to be safer than we are now. Right? And the clock has just started on these conversations. Right? What the US has said and what some of the others have agreed to is basically a bunch of chores. Right? So I said SBOM, but this is a real high-level summary, but you can see some of the words: automatic, evidence, right? Demonstrate, evidence. The processes that you use to deliver software are going to become hardened because they want you to prove that everything works. They don't want you to have human beings involved. They want you to be able to produce audit trails of how you produce software, right? And they also want to apply this to open source projects as well. And you can imagine what happens if you're a little tiny guy and you're managing one of those little tiny components. Suddenly, to be confronted by all these requirements, lots of open source people are beginning to shut shop. So we are trying to help, the software industry is trying to help them by countering some of these requirements, or in some ways making it practical, right? The one that really worries us, this is the Linux Foundation. The European Union have a different view from everybody else. And their view is that if a company has commercial ability to influence an open source project, then that company can force changes, therefore they can fix things, right? And where it starts to get nasty is that we're not sure what that really means. Because how many people here are contributing to open source? Okay, so how many of you are being paid to do so by your company? Okay, right, so obviously you might be paid directly to work on a project, a lot of that, but what happens if you're doing it for fun? But your company says, yeah, that's okay. Is that company paying? We don't know. So these issues of what do these laws mean are something we need to figure out, because that's why you'll see this. If you haven't seen Fix the CRA, it's worth having a look. Go have a look. It's an innocuous set of descriptions, as to, because it's a nice idea, if you have the power to influence an open source project, we're going to hold you accountable to do so. We're not going to hold the people who develop the software, the open source project people, we're not going to hold them accountable, but we're going to hold the people who pay them. And the problem with that, of course, is that if you're an airline pilot and you're contributing to, I don't know, model railway software, does that mean that American Airlines is culpable if there's a problem with that open railway software? Well, the EU thinks so. And what the EU might actually want to do is hold somebody in American criminally liable if there's a vulnerability and it's not fixed properly. Right? It's nasty. Right? So I think that's the biggest thing at the moment we want to challenge. But what I want you to take away is this is all real. Right? This is happening because of the amount of money that's being lost, because of the economic consequences. Everybody, governments are getting involved, and you are going to see this happen. You're going to see a change in the way the open source is developed. It's inevitable that people are going to get out. It's inevitable that people are going to band together to do this. It's inevitable that those companies that provide open source big time commercial are going to have a look about whether they want to do that. So it's quite possible some of these bigger open source projects we all depend on may go commercial. I mean, you may still get it for free, but it could easily stop being open source, right? And that's going to have an impact on everybody. I didn't mean to scare you, right? But I need you to understand that this is real. I also want you to understand that from our point of view, we are doing whatever we can to fix this, do our part. And from a Maven Central point of view, everything that we can figure out that we can add as a defense or give you information to help prevent these bad things happening, we're going to do so, right? Yes, we're going to make some money out of it because obviously that goes into commercial projects, and that's lovely. But the intent, and Brian, if Brian was here, would be saying, we want to help you. That's the whole point. We want to give you the safety net that you desire, you need. But we can't do that if you don't pay attention. So I'm here to say, please pay attention. Please start Googling for this stuff. Please go to Maven Central, go look at it. And if you like it, let us know. And if you don't like it, let us know, because we're trying to do it for you. That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Questions?
Yeah, we've got a question from our YouTubers. Elliot Rusty Harold has chimed in, and he's talking about the domain verification.
Oh, yeah.
And says, once Nexus credentials are transferred, domain ownership is no longer required. He goes on to say that is, domain ownership is only required for the initial publication. It doesn't protect against packages being sold to malicious actors.
Well, that's probably true because you can sell the domainers too as well. So, okay, you're quite, this is a good clarification. It's not completely free, but I still go, compared to everybody else's, it's Nirvana. Yeah. And I would say, please, Mr. YouTuber, go raise an issue on Maven Central and just complain, because they want feedback. And if you feel that that's not strong enough, then we would, do that.
Hi, I might be a bigger fan of Maven than you are.
Okay, thank you. Next.
And you left something out.
Okay.
8 years ago, I worked for a financial firm. And one of the things about Maven is that it can be distributed. And it could be distributed, and each corporation can decide which packages are allowed. And it was my job to tell other programmers at this financial firm, no, the one everybody else is using is this. You can't have this other one. And it's probably just as good, but everybody else at this corporation is using this one. And that's not a little feature, because as people quit and everybody else at the company is using this.
Well, yes. And I laud you for saying how wonderful it is. You're talking about Nexus, I think.
Well,
which is
we're
the tools
using
behind it.
Nexus
Yeah.
to get to Maven
Yeah.
Central.
Yeah.
Maven Central is the back end.
Yeah.
And you have it, but it's distributed,
Yeah. But I
which the other package managers are not.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, yeah, I get what you. Okay, yeah. I tried not to talk about. I didn't really want to talk about the products because I could talk about a lot of the stuff that what we've got would help. But I didn't. But I really didn't want to confuse. I just wanted let's talk about Maven Central rather than the Nexus. But yeah,
And then my next comment, and we're here at Google, and I'm using Java and Maven on my back end, but on my front end, I'm using Flutter, a Google product. And how did they decide that they didn't need a package manager?
Are you asking me? Is it new from Google? Put the pressure on somebody else. Yeah. Well, let's talk about this though, right? Because it's worth thinking about. It's how much of the code do you use that doesn't come from a package manager? And I will say more than you realize, because it isn't just about NPM or PyPy or whatever. How many of you create Docker images? Yeah. And some of the Docker, 9 times out, there's a wget, right? And you wget something, right? That's a dependency as much as putting something into a Maven POM is concerned, right? And that needs as much management and care as everything else. Yeah. Anyway, thank you. Next.
Any other questions?
Cool.
I came late, so if you already covered, skip. So thank you for providing the data. I think it's very important to see the numbers because numbers speak by themselves. Have you seen a trend raising or lowering or going down in terms of new vulnerabilities being found and also the one that we close? So the trend between the in and the out, basically.
So it's hidden a bit because the rate of software being created is accelerating. So the sheer quantity of open source and the sheer number of versions of things are raising. The number of vulnerabilities, I think it's about the same. In the Java space, I think it's about the same. In some of the other spaces like PyPy and stuff like that, where you can automatically upload things, the numbers are astronomical. I mean, but it's not mostly because they're doing like dependency confusion or typo squatting. So it is a vulnerability, but it's not the vulnerabilities that we're used to, which is like Log4j, where it's a coding problem. This is active malware, and active malware in some of these places is just, I mean, it's like spam. There's so much of it. But in terms of the Java space, I don't think it's changed very much, but the quantity of code is going up, right? Which is great because people are writing more stuff. It also means though that the number of, so we reckon that on average your applications have about 150 dependencies, because every first, direct dependency you put in, there's a transitive one, there's dependencies to dependencies. There's about 150 on those on average. And each of the components that you use on average produce 10 versions a year. So that's like, whatever that is, 1,500 combinations. And so there's more potential for vulnerabilities, and there's more potential for you to be using stale-ish code because the world is changing so much, So yeah, I'm not sure that answers your question directly, but it's not getting any better.
It's raising, basically.
Yeah.
Excuse me, which country, in your opinion, more close to getting the changes you discussed into legislation?
That's a really good question. How long does it take to get laws enacted in the US? I mean, is it quick? I mean, 10 year, 20 year, or 3 weeks? I mean,
It depends.
so the European, that CRA thing, that's really rapid, because the way that the laws get passed in the EU is they create multiple versions of the law because they have different groups tasked with different views of what the problem is. and then they take some consensus. But if there's minimal consensus, sorry, if there's minimal disagreement, then laws can happen very quickly. So in the EU, the CRA, I say there's 3 groups in the process, the way this works, and the draft we're worried about was created by one of those groups, and the other 2 groups don't really have a problem with it. So we think it's going to go into law really quickly. I don't know what the timescales are, but it is really quickly. So I think that's why we're more worried about that. And it's also practically could be the most devastating. What the US is trying to do and what Australia and others are trying to do are more pragmatic. So it's not even which one's going to happen faster. It's like which one's going to hit us the hardest. And I think that could be the CRA.
I think initially you said that we'll see why Sonatype owns it now. But can you just go over that a little bit explicitly?
Why
Sonatype owns Maven Central now?
Oh, so we own it,
right?
Because it was created by the CTO of Sonatype. So there were 2 people who started Maven, started Maven.
No, but you were funding it now, right?
Yeah.
It was public before.
No, it was they created it. It ran at Apache. They ran it. It was under Brian's desk in a server, but it was funded by public subscription. And that just became untenable because the cost for reliability and scaling was like they would just go, we can't get money in enough to do that. And so Brian decided he was going to fund it out of the company's purse.
A follow-up, unrelated.
Yeah.
Your site is amazingly fast. For example, one of the core. I was in a big financial company when I need to find. We have internal repo for those libraries that are allowed. When I have to find something, I always go to your site first and figure out, including vulnerabilities and everything, because it's so much faster. These local products that companies have, like JFrog or whatever, are way slower.
Oh, that's a shame.
I just want. Are you selling those products as well to manage your internal?
Yeah, we
repositories?
don't. Okay, so obviously we're not JFrog or Sneak or any of those, but so our product set, the one that most developers use is Nexus, and pretty much, I think pretty much every Java developer. I mean, how many people here are using Nexus or have used it? Yeah. Okay. So not as many hands as usual, but it is. It's an age thing, but it is the prevalent one, and yeah, it's the one that runs the back of Maven Central. Yeah.
For some reason, we replaced it with JFrog, and it's
it's horses of course. If it's how much it costs, what value to get out of it, it depends. I mean, the worry has always been with security that what you've got is you've got an executive looking to get tick mark rather than to get actual security. And I quite understand that when you're going, when they don't understand the scale of the problem, I quite understand that people go, well, we'll buy the cheaper version, right? Or we'll buy the ones that only do this, or I mean, it's whatever. I mean, I can't say whether you should buy Sonatype versus JFrog. Well, that's not my problem. That's your decision. What I would say is that you have to look much harder at what it gives you, and because this stuff is happening, and you've got to become cynical. You've got to say, when I download something, how do I know I can trust this? You've got to flip everything over, and once you start thinking about, well, I've downloaded this thing. Where did it come from? Okay. Well, I mean, I know, right? A bunch of people here, if I said to you, okay, let's do it. How many people here download stuff from the internet? Okay. How many of you ever check the license of the stuff that you download? Okay, right. How many of you check the license of... Sorry?
Always or sometimes?
Sometimes.
Anytime. Okay. Right. Now, how many of you check the license of the dependency of the dependency of the dependency of the dependency you downloaded. How many of you know what it is? Right?
We were just checking out Sneak, SNYK.
Yeah.
It's doing that.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, we do that as well. But the point is that you don't even think of it as a choice. And so when we're selecting software, security software, it's so often it's just driven by, what's the cheapest, can we get it installed? What's, does it impact developer productivity? And I'm going, whatever your choices are, please add to your choice thoughts about, can it detect not only bad code now, can it detect bad code in deep dependencies? Can it help you understand what choices to make? And how good is helping you understand the characteristics of the open source project that produced it? Because that's the biggest killer. We know if you choose code from a repository, from a GitHub repo, where the project uses code reviews, they are 50% less likely to have a vulnerability in their future than those that don't do code reviews. I have a whole bunch of stuff like that, yeah.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome, thank you.
So again, thanks to Rustam and Steve, and thanks to Google for hosting, and thanks to Microsoft for the pizza. Thank you, William. Our next meeting is the 19th of October with Matt Rabel, who's going to compare Java REST frameworks. I think he's going to compare 4 of them. So that's going to be a cool meeting. So thank you. And to the people of the future who are watching this years from now, and where the machines have taken over, we tried to stop them. So good night, everybody.